Are supposed to be talking about day programs, employment, and life in the fast lane once you've moved out of your house, or your family home, anyway. Moving out of the family home is probably the biggest transition you're ever going to do, and people often ask me, how did you do it? Why did you do it? And was it successful? And it's been 100% successful. It was planned very specifically. As I said earlier, Joseph moved out during his 20th year, 3 months before his 21st birthday, which would have been the same time that most of my 3 other daughters were going off to college. And they eventually did that. One of Joseph's biggest, the thing he hated most in his life at the time, living at home, was the fact that his 3 younger sisters got to drive the car, got to go out by themselves, got to have friends of their own that they could see without mom supervising. And he either had to stay home with a care provider or go out with a care provider. I was dragging him to his sister's dance recitals and volleyball games. And so I've heard a lot of people talking about behaviors because you're dragging them to things they wouldn't have to do if they were in an age-appropriate environment. So when you think of why you would want to do this and not wait until you die, again, I said it. But if you're waiting until you die, you're too late. Because your individual who lives with you right now doesn't want to live with you. If you have been including them in their community. And they love you very much. But they don't know what it's like to make their own choices for every minute of their day. And that's the only thing that motivated me, is I want to create a life for Joseph where he is making his decisions. And again, we talked about person-centered planning that's coming up through all different kinds of sources. In California, our Land Management Act is a person-centered plan. So the IPP has to be based on what Joseph wants to do and say and how he wants to live. So we made the choice, and I fast forward to the apartment. And in order to actually make it happen, we had to do a few things. He had, my dad bought him a recliner. He loves recliners, you know, the little lever thing and putting the feet up. I think he watched way too many Friends episodes. But he loves his recliner. So my dad bought him a recliner, which sat in my house, which I would never have, and for 6 months before he moved. And so we had that recliner, and nobody was allowed to sit in it. Once in a while, his sisters would do it just to piss him off. And he would come and push him out of the chair. And it was the only time he actually had control over who can sit in. That's my chair. You can't sit in that. And the only reason I had known this is that I was speaking to someone else earlier today that Joseph, every time his oldest sister, who now could drive a car, walked by him, he'd haul off and hit her because she now had a car. And the only reason I bought her a car when she was in high school, and trust me, it was a jalopy. It was an old 89 Mustang that the girls called a donkey because it didn't deserve to be called a Mustang. And it was ugly. But the only reason I bought the car, she had to do some of Joseph's transportation or the girls' transportation back and forth to dance class. I was a single mom at the time. I got divorced when my youngest was 2. And so I said, all right, well, you can have the car as long as you start doing some of the carpooling. She said, okay. But he made her life hell when he was in the car. And this was not going to work out. So it was okay if I drove him where he needed to go, but she had to take the girls to volleyball and recitals and all that other stuff. He made it very clear that he was still going to be in charge and that he was going to keep me close by. Okay, that's fine. So we had the recliner, and we had it in his bedroom in the apartment with everything that was going to be moved from his current bedroom. And the living room was already furnished, so I didn't have to move or do anything except for this recliner. So for about 3 weeks before we moved, he kept taking, we'd take a box of something that we'd filled up from the stuff off his walls, and we take it over to his apartment, just 20 minutes across the, well, nowadays it's 45 minutes across San Francisco. Go to his apartment, and he'd take it, and I said, take it to your bedroom, this is your stuff. And he'd move it, and he went into his bedroom, and he knew which one was his, because the other one was empty. It was for his live-in tenant who had not moved in yet. And he just started putting stuff into his room, and we did this every week, a little bit at a time, until it was the last day to move. And then we moved his bed, and we moved the recliner. And when he moved all that stuff in, and I had already filled the kitchen. I didn't make him do all the plates and stuff, because they would have been in pieces. But we get there, we have him all settled up, and he sees his bedroom. I said, you got your bedroom? It's all set? Yep, we've got this, that, the TV, here's the remote, blah, blah, blah. Got it all set up, and he got in his recliner. He sat there, he flipped his legs back, had the TV on, and I said, bye. I cried all the way home. It was Father's Day, 2001, and oh my God. I could not believe it. I said, this is the best thing and the worst thing. I cannot believe it. I said, I'm going to be all, I mean, you know how these kids sleep or don't sleep. I went home, I didn't sleep for 6 months. I'm going, great. He goes to his own apartment and I can't sleep. But it took 6 months before I actually had a full night's sleep. And my pediatrician, who I told you was a really good friend of mine, she said, well, maybe you should start taking some of those drugs that Joseph takes to sleep. I said, yeah, no, I think I'm fine. I'll be okay in another 6 months. So it took 6 months to make that transition. But I'll tell you, his language increased 100%. He started communicating because he wanted to direct what he wanted to do. Now, most of the time, it's yes and no, Joseph. I mean, how many times have you trained paraprofessionals or any staff and you say, okay, he can do yes and no all the time, just do yes and no. And they say, hey, Joe, where'd you get your hair cut? What part of that question is a yes or no? Do you not understand this? So this is where the training, we go back to the training and what you have to do for staff. You have to teach yes or no. That's the only way you're going to communicate with him until you start understanding his sign language and understanding his gestures, because the new staff weren't going to get it. So we're going to do yes and no's, and that's all we're going to do. So, but he he'd had me to be his personal care provider, like shaving and showering and all that stuff. I was the one doing it all the time, right? Which is why I hired a woman who he fired, because he didn't want, he goes, ha, she's not my mom. You're not going to touch me there. You're not going to do that. This is not for you. And I went, oh, okay. So we hired a guy, and he came in, and these guys were actually rather creative, partially because they had not worked with a lot with people with developmental disabilities before, and they weren't sure, you know, how are we going to do this, and I don't know if I want to do some of that personal stuff. Well, the first thing they said is, well, we're going to put a clear shower curtain up in his bathtub, and they wanted him to shower, not take a bath, which he thought was amusing. I thought the shower curtain was never going to last, but it did. And we had a scrunchie on a long pole, and he had a scrunchie, and we had soap, and we squirted him with soap, and he thought it was the greatest thing in the world. And you know how much Angelman kids love water, right? This was hilarious. And so because I said, well, this is how I do a shower, and Kathy would say, this is how she trained her people to do stuff. Well, I'm going to see what you're going to do. So well, they could see through the shower curtain. So there I said, okay. And I used to tell Joe, pits and privates, Joe, we got to get them clean. It was hilarious. They did the best job. And they were all on it. And they didn't mind it. It was a team effort. He says, this is cool. They were like fraternity brothers. And it made a huge difference on how he felt as part of this community that he was creating. There were about 7 staff that came in and out of his life throughout the week. So that's practically a family. And he just thought that was the greatest thing in the entire world. I do remember that I had to go over there every now and then with the white glove test, because with bunch of guys living together, they think pizza boxes are coffee tables. I'm going, really? What are you doing? This goes in the garbage. And it was Joseph's job to get rid of the garbage, so actually I yelled at him, hey, you're supposed to clean up the garbage and take it down the chute. So he would. But he thought it was pretty cool that it was his job to do that. He thought it was pretty cool that he directed all the activities during the day. And he thought it was that everybody asked permission to touch him, to be a part of his life. Is it okay if we do this, Joe? You know, toileting was an issue, of course, it always is. It's Joseph's one way to control his entire world. So when we hire new staff, we just say, by the way, he's going to sign that he has to go to the bathroom all the time, because then he's going to he knows you're going to come running. And it's like a red flag in front of a bull. But that transition of staff and turning the house into his apartment into something he was totally in control of was something he did not have at all in my house, and could not if I was there. Partially because I was there, partially because I'm a little bit of a control freak myself, and it's just, there's no separation. When you go away to college, you learn independent skills because mom's not looking over your shoulder. Joseph learned that job in high school to do what he was supposed to do because the shadow of his aide was a shadow way far away. He could have dropped that bag of garbage on the ground and not taken it to the dumpster or whatever it was he was doing. He didn't have to do all that. But so when we started looking at what he was going to do during the day, that became a challenge. Because a lot of times it's day programs. And day programs, sheltered workshops, they call them different things in different states, are usually a large group of people with disabilities. I don't think they actually make widgets anymore, but there are some of them that put together packages for conventions. And they sit in a room and that's what they're doing. Well, Joseph, first of all, doesn't have the fine motor skills to do that. He wouldn't follow the direction to do that. And he has the attention span of a flea. So if you are in, he actually would have needed more skills to work in the workshop than he could have. Now, in San Francisco, we had gotten rid of all the workshops by the time he was 21, 22, getting out of the school system. And so we were creating some skill building classes. We had music classes, we had school classes on site to do check balancing and paying of rent so that some of the other participants in our programs could learn how to keep track of their life, whether it was making a list of things and check it off that I did my grocery shopping and this is how I did it. They were kind of independent living skills we were teaching in these smaller classes. There were probably only 10 in each class, and they were all people with disabilities being served by the Arc of San Francisco. Well, Joseph wasn't going to do math, so that wasn't going to happen, so he didn't do that. He did do the drum class. He has done other music classes. That's when I signed him up at City College, and he went to take the gospel choir class that he was in for 3 years. He loved it. He loved the music. He was in a PE class that he signed up. No credit, no tuition, no nothing. It was just our local city college. He took the bus all the way over there with his one-on-one aide to go to the class. The PE class, he was supposed to walk around the track. It was a track class because he wasn't lifting weights. That was one of the things we said, yeah, we're not going to have him lifting weights. But he was walking the track. Couldn't get him to sign up for a swimming class because I didn't have enough supervision for that to work. But the track was good exercise for him. We were trying to keep his weight down. Kids with Angelman syndrome are orally fixed and want something in their mouth all the time, and a lot of times it's food. So watching his weight has been something we've had to do for a long time. He's about my height, about 150, 170 pounds, and he's okay, he's right in the norm. He's not obese in any way, shape, or form, but I also told any of these guys if they fed him fast food, I'd kill him, because don't take him and feed him a bad diet. And so it turned out that the day program was not going to be something for Joseph because of his disability. His attention span wouldn't allow him, and he didn't want to be in with a group of people that all had disabilities. He had been fully included in his middle school, well, 5th grade, middle school, and high school. For him to go back to being in an environment where they were people who couldn't communicate with him any better than he could communicate with them, it wasn't going to be his choice. So that's when we knew we had to start looking at meaningful employment, whether it was meaningful volunteerism or supported employment or other kinds of programming. The Arc of San Francisco is who created it with us. I was on their board at the time, probably president of the board, and we were working on trying to create these kinds of programs for people. A lot of the Arcs, the Arc of California has a number of chapters. They are all service providers. By our contract with the Arc of the United States, or our affiliation agreement with the Arc of the United States, every Arc must have an advocacy piece to their mission. That's the primary mission. We are a human rights, disability rights organization as a nation. But each of the individual chapters can choose to provide or not provide services. And there's a huge debate about whether there's a conflict of interest by providing a service to people that you also getting reimbursed for from the state. And so that argument continues. But we advocate for all people, for all services, but we only may provide employment services, or we only may provide the educational programs. So the whole day program question is individualized. But if you're looking at someone who was fully included through education and then taking them out of school and putting them back into more of a congregate setting, you can see where Joseph's behavior would have absolutely regressed. And when we did that, it did. And that was why, before he even got to the Arc of San Francisco at age 22, I was on their board, closing that workshop and creating a one-to-one program. And that was so that Joseph would have the program that's appropriate. Because what's the problem with this transition from school system to adult system is they don't match. You come out with these skills, and this is where the rest of the world is. And you're going, what? I have to go backwards? And how am I going to, that doesn't make sense. So in case you don't think you're busy enough with your kids in high school, you really need to be on somebody's board far ahead so you can have it ready when they get there. I was lucky enough to have it happen, and it worked for me, but that is the direction that some of these day programs are going in because of the congregate setting rules are changing. The federal government is going to put bigger caps on the number of people that will be served, or they'll do block grants. They're going to send the money to the state and let the state choose who is going to get the money. And a lot of these states are not going to fund day programs, and they won't fund workshops. And so it's going to take them a long time to get there, but it probably will be something that doesn't exist. So what kind of community stuff can you create? Well, people have asked me, going to the YMCA, going to your local city college. Joseph's he'll be 39, so he can still hang out at a college level group and have peers and be cool with his peers, because he knows he's cool. He started, I'll never forget when I showed up at a meeting one time and Joseph had a goatee. And I went, what are you doing with a goatee? And then I looked at the staff and I went, you all have goatees. He wanted a goatee. Well, I said, I don't know how to, I'm shaving a guy, right, when he was living with me. I said, I didn't know you stopped in the middle. I went from one ear to the other and it's clean. I said, who knew I was going to stop in the middle and make a goatee? And I wouldn't have the foggiest idea where to stop. So at least now I can follow it. But all of his staff had goatees. And his staff wrote me notes and they said, his clothes are really uncool. We're going to get rid of the sweats. I said, well, zippers and snaps, you can't do zippers and snaps on jeans. What are you, crazy? He goes, yeah, but we don't want to be seen with him. He looks like a dork. Oh, thanks. I said, that's okay. And of course his sisters are going, we told you, Mom. How long are you going to leave him in those sweats? I said, okay. I get it. I said, all right, but that means more negotiating when it comes to getting dressed. Got it? Yeah. He's not going to wear a sweatshirt and sweats all the time. I thought that was great input from staff. I went, okay, here's one for you guys. I'll take that. But we had to have had that rapport. And they said, well, he doesn't like going to this place. And he doesn't like going to that place. That's the only reason I knew that when he was doing the graffiti patrol, and I don't know, if I'm repeating some of these stories, guys, you can tell me to shut up, but, well, please don't do that. He was going around painting the graffiti off the walls in the neighborhood of where the Arc San Francisco is, and after a while he just didn't like it. And again, I use the analogy of him having the attention span of a flea. We just kept changing the different jobs he had as a result of that. I did make him finish stuff. I mean, the guys were pretty, committed to, you're not going to quit in the middle of the day, you're not going to be gone now, and you're not going to be able to wear your jumpsuit tomorrow if you quit for sure, we got to do this till the end of the month or whatever. We negotiated a way so that there was some, but he could refuse that, I don't really want to do that anymore, and we'd find a time to break it off. The ARC and some of the agencies, and a lot of people don't like working with provider agencies, but if you don't, you're not going to have the connections at Nordstrom so we could unhang the clothes. And you're not going to have the break rooms in a Deloitte Touche. Well, no, they're not Touche anymore. Anyway, so that they had Deloitte, I think they're just Deloitte now. Anyway, Deloitte, they clean the break rooms. Those are things that he had already done in high school, cleaning the cafeteria table, so he could do the break room. Now, it did take maybe 2 of them at that particular place, because he wasn't handling the breakables, but he was cleaning the table, and somebody else was doing the dishes. I think that the advantage of having a one-on-one for him made him be able to go almost anywhere. And he could be a part of his community. Classes at the zoo. They had zoo classes for caretaking, the SPCA. They do desensitization with the animals. And I said, please don't, I don't know, the cats, we had cats, and he picked them up by the tail, and I said, maybe we should have Joseph sitting down and have big dogs around him. That would be better than cats that he's going to pick up by tails. And that worked. But again, you just have to find the right match. And those are the kinds of programs that we had to start creating. Somebody wanted him to go to a yoga class. Well, that was going to happen. They had mats, and but we in our living skills classes at the Arc San Francisco, it was a site-based classroom setting, but it was breaking things down. It was a way to transition kids that were in schools or in their own family home to come during the day to start learning things more independently. Cooking, computers. I mean, Joseph's not going to cook. There's no doubt about it. That's just never going to happen, so I don't have to worry about that. But he sets the table and he clears the table, and he clears his own dishes and puts them in the sink. Those are things he never did when he was at my house. I'd tell him to do that. He'd go, yeah. But all of the independence he showed literally happened within months of him moving out of my house. But the toughest decision you're going to have to make is, when are you going to do it? Why wait till you're so old that you can't even retire after that? Or so old that the transition itself is too hard? It's really, but you are making 2 different lives. I think Todd was the one talking about his son goes to a day program during the day, and then he has a different community type setting for the evenings and staff that he can go out with, go to the movies, you're going to have to patch it together. That's why my map here wasn't about all that Joseph did as much as these were the choices I had. And if you know how they're funded, which goes back to some of what Nicole was saying, or any of us have been saying today, you want to make sure that you understand if there's a match, there's an incentive for people to set up those programs. But as kids are graduating from school and becoming young adults, they are coming out of school with more independent skills than the community is ready to afford them. And if you keep them at home living with you with babysitters and respite, they will lose any independence they started to think they were getting close to. It is absolutely data proven that when people move out of their family home, and out of the family home may mean an apartment downstairs. It could mean the carriage house in the back. It could mean next door. It could be across town. It could be with friends. Some people go through high school and they end up finding that personal attendant in that high school with that person and set up an apartment or a house. I mean, in California, you don't buy a house for anybody. You don't buy a house. My kids are saying, oh, they want my house. I say, yeah, when I die, you're not getting anything until then. So I'm lucky that Joseph saw in his HUD-funded apartment, because even the rents for a 1,000 square foot apartment is about $3,000–4,000 a month. And otherwise, I'd have to ship him off to where, which of course I would not do. It does beg the question for different kinds of living environments for people to live in. I know they've got gated communities people are promoting all over the country. Small little communities where they think it's cute and adorable. They've got cottages, and they might have a 7-Eleven, and they've got jobs, and they've got things for them to do. But most of those staffing is all volunteers. They are volunteers with no money, no anything but a house to stay in. I don't think there's a lot of leverage there. There's no accountability, and there won't be any funding from the federal government. That is a bias of mine. Don't like the gated communities. They're not any safer than anywhere else. Safety is the other question. A lot of people say, why should I ever, let my son out of a day program? He likes it there. Maybe let's say it was somebody else I'm talking about, a dear friend of mine in DC, and he says, oh, but my son, who's very much like my son, he just loves it there. He just can't wait to get up and go in the morning, and can't wait, and he comes back. And I said, okay. I said, but he still sleeps on the floor right next to your bed. What's going to happen when you're dead? I said, Pat, would you stop threatening me with death? And I said, He still sleeps in your bed. There is no independence going on here. He has as equally a dependent personality set up in his day program as he does at home. He's just transferred it. I mean, Joseph wakes up every morning and they figure out, okay, what are you going to wear today, Joe? And they usually throw a couple of choices at him, otherwise he's going to empty the drawers on the floor, and then we're going to have another thing. Take 2 hours to get ready. Here are your jeans, and here's your shirt, and here, we'll put them on. And sometimes they go on, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they go on upside down or inside out. We usually get it all figured out. Where are we going to go today? We have to do this on the list in the afternoon. The 8:30 to 2:30 shift to say, where do we want to go? And that guy, who is the personal attendant for the day, is doing the community training stuff. Just, let's go see the city, let's go to City College, let's go out to Treasure Island, let's do whatever we're going to do today. We might go to a drum class, but we go to the museum, and there's transportation time. I mean, everything takes 3 times as long when you're traveling with an AS kid, right? We're going to go to the zoo. Oh, that's all day. Got to get there, you got to get back. There's lunch on the way, and do you have to go to the bathroom? One of the things, another reason we have men staff, restrooms. What are you going to do if I had a female? I mean, I don't even take Joseph to the bathroom when we're in public. He knows it. You hold it, we're not going now. We'll be home in a minute. But, that has been a huge change. He can go all day. Actually, none of the guys actually ever have to take him during the day. Of course, that's also training, so that before he leaves the house, we have a big conversation about where we're going and how we're going to go there. Because he wants to know, what bus are we taking? What bus stop do we start at? Where do we get off? The whole thing, and that whole conversation goes back and forth. We've used picture books at different times and some other kinds of communication methods, but actually these guys usually have it on their phone. They just pull it up and say that we're going to the academy. We're going to the aquarium. Okay, that's where I want to go. And then they're off and running. We did have an app of some kind that we used once for communication, but that was outdated about 10 seconds after we put it in. So it didn't allow for any flexibility. We try and make staff as flexible as possible because they have other jobs, because nobody pays DSPs enough money. So the direct support staff are usually coming between and from and to other jobs. Therefore, they all relieve each other, and the shift is usually 8:30 to 2:30, and then 2:30 to 9, and then the overnight guy takes over until 8:30 in the morning. We don't do 12-hour shifts. That's too much, Joseph. And I just know that. But I have guys that do 3 days in a row, and I go, that's a lot of Joseph. 3 days, 8 hours. And they go, okay, that's good. But if the rapport is right, and they are doing something that's interesting, not only for you, Joseph, but for the staff. Have you ever been to some of these workshops? The staff is bored as hell. I see them on their phones. You go watch them, they are not engaging. This is not an enriching environment. Unless you're in the classrooms. A lot of the training programs, where they do job training programs, those are really pretty exciting. Oftentimes people are learning something. And the teachers are engaging because they're in front of the class. And there's usually a couple of aides around that work with the participants in the program. But again, I'm using my skills as an educational advocate to review the programs that are available and deciding whether or not. The ARC San Francisco is not the only provider in San Francisco. There are other ones. And so I went and looked at other ones and see what they had available. And that's what you guys have to do. And you also have to look now so that you know what is happening 5 years from now, 4 years from now, whenever you need it, in 10 years. It's a whole new world out there. The community involvement is senior centers, libraries. I mean, there's so much. I really just started thinking about any retired individual who no longer had a job, because I know employment is really a big thing for a lot of people. And Employment First was a program that went through the state, and all that they were requiring everyone to look at employment as a first option after people got out of school to find them jobs. Well, people who couldn't hold down a job 20 hours a week or 30 hours a week or 5 hours a week were being sent home and not getting any services. And I don't want my son sent home and not getting anything. I'd rather get him a one-to-one program and have him traveling around the city or anywhere in the Bay Area. He loves to ride the train. He rides the train down to San Mateo, down the peninsula, where one of his friends is. And friends, that's another thing, friends. Who are your kids' friends? Are they the other persons with disabilities here? You're a friend? Yeah, and you know what, there are, and that's why Joseph goes back and forth to the ARC for some of the people that he has met there and known for years. He especially met them from the school system, and they came out to the same ARC, to the ARC San Francisco, and so he knew a lot of those people. And those friends are his friends. But for the most part, I built a family around him who were his friends. And I'd say that they're his paid staff. But he doesn't think of them as paid staff. He thinks of them as family. Now, am I fooling myself? Am I being arrogant about the whole thing? No, I think I'm just trying to be real. I mean, our kids with Angelman syndrome don't understand. I have not found, Joseph, let's not generalize, but Joseph's give and take in a relationship is difficult to understand unless you are somebody who spends a lot of time with him, like his staff do. They think of him as friends. Hence, I could go back and have 2 of his staff take him to my daughter's wedding. Because those are the relationships you're trying to build. That's the trust you're trying to build. I need them to be able to trust, Joseph to trust them enough to go someplace new. I want him to be able to go on vacations. So I'm saving money for him to go on vacations. Does he always have to be with me? We took him to Disneyland. Of course, I took his sister and my husband and myself, the three of us, to go to Disneyland. Because God forbid I should have to go to the bathroom during the day. So those are the kinds of things you have to, that you're thinking about. But these guys, they take him anywhere. And it makes a big difference to the quality of his life. And when I set up my special needs trust, and you write your letter of intent for how you want his life to be lived, it's from his perspective. I want people I know around me. I want people I trust around me. Does he care whether they're paid or not? I don't know that he does. Do they have to all be people with disabilities or Angelman syndrome? I've never been affiliated with an Angelman syndrome group, ever, except for the 3 conventions I've come through. There aren't enough of us. I'm a dental hygienist. I rarely go to those conventions, unless I have to get my continuing ed credits. So how do you pick your friends? They're by people, most of my friends are at the arts. They're people that are invested in the same things I'm invested in. So we are all here because we have something in common. We have kids with Angelman syndrome. And we want them to have a quality life. And we want them to have a place that's more than just safe to go to during the day. Let's have them have new experiences. I mean, because safety is great, and I want Joseph to be safe at all times. But let's take him someplace different and be a part of his regular community. Somebody asked me, or told me about their daughter who goes to the local Starbucks and has a hot chocolate every morning. She wasn't there for a couple of days, and when she walked back in, they just said, "Hey, Jane, we hadn't seen you in a while. Where you been?" Well, Joseph's got that. That's what you want to see with the people that are around him. But when that woman answered me in the back, she thought all of his friends were people with disabilities that he went to school with. Why does it have to be that way? There are people that have been caregivers in Joseph's life over the last 39 years that are still his friends and come in and out of his life now. And they wouldn't go into that day program. They wouldn't go there because he wouldn't like it. And I do want him to continue to be in his community doing whatever he wants. And he has to be able to do it. I think the communication to make that happen is probably the hardest piece for all of us. But communication is probably number one for all of us here. So I'm not telling you anything you don't know. It's just about continue to dream big. If you've got kids in school, you need to dream for what. And if you have siblings, what do you want for them? If I want my 3 daughters to go off to college, I wanted Joseph to go off and do something. So when he went to City College to that gospel choir class, by God, I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. So I don't know that living at home and separating yourself is probably the hardest thing you can ever do. It's probably almost impossible unless you put a wall between you and have that apartment next door or downstairs or in the carriage house. I don't know that. And when do you do it? That's a hard decision to make too. Somebody came up here to say, well, I don't know if my sister's ready for independence yet. When are they? Are they all ready for college? When you send them off? Were you ready when you had this kid? I'm sorry, did you get a notice? I didn't. I mean, no. We all make our own choices about being willing to push through and find the answers. And that's why you guys are here. You're not here because you had nothing else to do and you flew into Louisville, Kentucky. I left my family vacation to come here. My whole family's at Lake Tahoe right now. And, but I believe that this organization needs to support families. I'm disappointed there's not 300 people in here. And I found 4 Californians. What the heck are you doing not finding me in California? I do not understand that at all. But the Angelman Syndrome Foundation has provided a lot of research and information for resources for a lot of people. I think that's great. I was here early enough yesterday to catch the exhibits that were out there. And I would have loved to have seen more on the communication thing today, but it was running at the same time as this one. But this is the first time they've done family support. And it's probably the biggest thing and the most important thing you guys can get from one another, from me, from any of the other people in this across the country, because it doesn't have to be disability specific. Our kids are, yeah, they're unique, but they're not that unique. Joseph wasn't diagnosed with Angelman syndrome until he was 12. It didn't even exist. So I just had to hook up with other families. And I'd say, well, that was a little bit of this, and I'll take a little bit of that, and I'll know a little bit of that, and I had to teach myself. And that's what you guys are doing. The answer is not going to be here by itself. It's going to be between you guys. You have to hook up together. And you're probably in a zillion different states. We know we got California, we got Maine. Where are you from? Michigan. We got a couple of Michigan folks. Where are you from? New York? New York. Where are you from? Tennessee. I like Nashville. Where are you from, sir? Ohio. Indiana. California. I know you're California. South Africa. Well, you definitely get the prize for the longest trip. I thought I was getting it from Reno, but I guess you get it. And sir, in the back? Alaska. Whoa. Oh, Nebraska. Not close at all. Ma'am? New York.
California.
Oh, you're one of the Californians, right? Sorry. You changed seats. Where are you from?
I'm from Indiana.
Indiana. I thought you said so. Maine.
Illinois.
Illinois. You're the 2 Californians. Where are you 2?
Jersey.
All right. They have a great ARC in New Jersey. The state ARC is one of the best. Yes? Las Vegas. Yeah, we only have, because of Reno and Las Vegas, that's where we have state chapters. I mean, local chapters, we don't have a state chapter. We've never been able to make one fly for the ARC. And West Virginia. Yeah, we've had some, that's right. I'm sorry you asked some questions. So, I mean, look at this group. You're going to call me next week? You're going to call each other next week? I know you are. You're in Fresno. I know. My phone's going to be, I'll have 6 text messages before I get home. It's just, I cannot say how much the family support made it possible for me to make the hard decisions that I had to make. Making Joseph fully included, at the time I was, he was 5th grade. I was probably running the CAC, which is the Community Advisory Committee in our school district, which many states have, where you have to advise the school district on their state plan. And each local plan has a plan. Local school district has a plan. And I was there trying to figure out how I was going to get him fully included. And at the time, they were talking about, remember mainstreaming? Anybody old enough to remember the term mainstreaming? Otherwise known as dump and hope, because they'd put you in a regular ed class and not give you any services. So
That's how they do it in India.
Yeah, that's how they do it in Indiana. All right.
Oh, mainstreaming.
Okay. So we don't call it mainstreaming anymore, but I didn't want to call it inclusion, and Joseph moved into this 5th grade classroom. And it was a special day class, because they weren't ready to do full inclusion yet. But the special day classroom, the teacher came up to me and she goes, "Pat, I've heard about you. Now, I'm not going to be doing any of this community-based stuff. I'm not going to be doing it." And I said, "Don't worry, Ronnie. I got you. Don't worry about it. We got it." So that was when I had hired his one-to-one aide, his first one-to-one aide ever. And so what we did was, we described his community as the community of the school. He was in a special day class, but he was given the responsibility of getting out of the classroom as much as possible to do a variety of jobs. And the variety of jobs were in the school, whether it was taking the attendance down to the attendance classroom or whatever you do in 5th grade. There were a number of different things. I know at the time they didn't have the kids in, they didn't have a similar lunchtime, recess time, or PE time. And I said, why? Well, that was dumb. So we changed that. But I got the one-on-one aid to get Joseph out of the classroom as much as possible, because this was my idea of redefining community for Joseph. It was about at this time that I was also had to make one of the 3 hardest decisions I ever had to make. And the first one was this one, and it was to take academics out of his IEP. And when I let go of the academics, I cried. I said, we're not reading and writing and arithmeticing anymore. He's never going to read his name. And he's not going to do some of the things that I thought he was going to do in school. And they said, so what is he going to do? And I said, he's going to learn to be responsible and independent, and he's going to learn to socialize with his peers and respect authority and follow direction, and he's going to sit in that damn chair for 30 minutes if he has to, and this is what's going to happen, because that's what's expected of his peers. And they went, oh, how are you going to do that? And that's how I started with the one-on-one aid and got him to have his little jobs all over there, all over the school. He went across the hall to the other fifth grade classroom, a regular 5th grade classroom, and he collected the pencils from Mr. B, and he brought the pencils back to his desk in his special ed classroom, and he had to sharpen all the pencils. So he sharpened pencils, he took the attendance, he went down to the cafeteria. He was always doing something in the cafeteria, I think. I'm surprised he didn't get fat, actually. But I guess they weren't feeding him there. But that was the beginning of me changing his educational program. Because then when we moved to middle school the very next year, he was fully included in middle school. He had his one-to-one aid, and he trusted her, because I'd had a year with her in 5th grade already. And so then they had to go and change classrooms all the way around and go with each one of the teachers. And the teachers, at that time, they should have ideally been modifying curriculum. I said, well, look, we're not going to have you modify freshman algebra or 6th grade algebra or whatever it is they teach them now. But they did a lot of group dynamics at that time, so that the kids sat around and studied together. So they were doing group projects a lot of time, when it was a state report or whatever the reports were on. Joseph sat with that group. And so he was in a table of regular 6th graders, and there were probably 6 of them. And they had a binder that they kept their work in. Joseph would go get the binder. He had to know which one it was. So I said, could we at least just make it a different color than all the white ones that are up there? Because he's not going to read it. But if we say, go get the black one, he could probably get the black one. And he'd get the notebook, and they'd fill it out. They'd do their thing. And he was drawing. Joseph loves to draw. He's constantly saying, draw, 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 draw. Give him a colored pencil and a piece of paper, and he's doing that all for an hour. But he's sitting at his desk, and they're having their conversation, and they're laughing. These guys are just being 6th graders. And this was really exciting for him, to be with his peers that didn't have disabilities, and he was accepted as one of their peers. And then the bell would ring, and he knew what that meant. So he'd get his backpack and he'd move on to the next class. We learned that if he wears the backpack in the front, he's not going to grab anyone going down the hall, so that was helpful. So he became totally assimilated into that middle school. And he did all 3 years there. When he graduated, he had gone through, he actually went across the stage when he graduated from middle school. But he got halfway across. Somebody started him on this side, and an aide was on the other side, and I thought he was going to fall into the trombone section where the band was in the front playing, no, 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 no. And I'm going, oh, please. And I'm sitting there in the audience with my mom and dad, and he's crossing the stage, and he gets halfway across the stage. I mean, you can just see this, right? And he gets across, and he sees this entire audience all staring at him. And he's going, and now what do I do? And I go, oh, please don't fall into the trombone section. And then he didn't move, and he just stood there, waiting, guys in the back who were part of the sports team, because he was a water boy for the football team, were in the back of the room. And they all started just going, Joe, go, Joe, go, Joe, go, Joe. And they all started chanting his name. And he saw them in back, because he saw their faces, behind these lights. And he laughed, and he clapped, and he walked across the stage. I was bawling my eyes out. It was the best moment of my life. It was huge. And I knew that he had been totally accepted in this community. And I said, I'm never going back. I'm just not going back. And as a result, that's why he leads the life he lives. The second decision was the one to move him out to the apartment. Do I, don't I? Do I, don't I? Is this too early? Am I ready? Or is he ready? You're never ready. And the third one was conserving him. Because I know that people object to that a lot, but I don't trust anybody but me to make sure the systems work together. There's nobody that can draw this map that can get Social Security and IHSS and Medicaid and an agency and hiring and firing to work together and do all the right things. At least I wouldn't approve of it. But I know his sister will. I know my husband can. And the people that will come behind them will be able to do that. But I don't trust the federal government or all the agencies. But I will work to make sure they do right, at least legislatively. So those are the tough decisions we have to make. And as you get out of high school, I don't know what's available in your communities, and look at how diverse you are. But you're not going to find an Angelman thing. You're just not. You're going to have to go find other people with other disabilities that you can learn from, families, and that's who we have to hook up with. Because that advocacy is what we really need. The advocacy of us together. But this group, I don't want you to feel isolated, because now you're going to go back to Maine, or you're going to go back to Georgia or New York or wherever you're going back to and go, well, now what do I do? I'm sitting here all by myself in my living room. And that sounded great when I was in Louisville, but right now I'm not so sure. But that's why you have to go back and find those other groups of people, because they are the ones that are going to give you the answers for the real life stuff. I'm not taking away from the research and the cure stuff that they want to do with the Angelman Syndrome Foundation, but that's not my thing. Nobody's going to change my son. There is no cure. There's prevention. That's all they might come up with. They're not going to come up with a cure. I had to be a part of a bioethics study once, and they asked me that question. They said, so what would you do if they could cure Joseph of Angelman syndrome? I said, what do you mean you're going to inject him with a deletion of the long arm of the 15th chromosome and have him magically it would work? I mean, do you just do that? So, well, no, what if it was a cure? Whether it's a pill or a process or a therapy or what? What would you do? I said, well, if it worked, first thing I'd do is change his name. Because he wouldn't be Joseph anymore. Because for all the work and the tears and the pain and the hours we have all put in to get to this place, we have done it for these kids. And he would not be Joseph if he didn't have that crazy old laugh, or if he didn't hit his sister when she walked by every now and then. And he wouldn't be the kid who, as soon as he sees me, I walk into his apartment, he doesn't even act as if I'm there. We come in for the monthly meeting. This is my place. This is my place, and you are not cool here. And I have to be there at least 30 minutes before I even get a hi. It cracks me up. His father, who's my ex-husband, when he walks in, he gets a hi, because he doesn't see him as often. But the point is, he knows he's in charge of his life. And he is very happy and grateful for that. And I love that crazy old laugh. I'm glad I'm not staying up at night anymore. And he sleeps through the night.
What?
8 to 10 hours.
Did that happen when he moved out?
He started sleeping through the night when he moved out. At first it was tough. It took a while before they got through the routine. and we did it. Oh my God. We used to have a video, well, it was 20 years ago, right? We had a videotape that you put in one of those machines. I think it's called a VCR. And had a TV on it. It was all attached in one piece. Oh my God, I'm dating myself. But we had a family vacation. We had all gone to Hawaii once. And there was pictures of myself and my four siblings, his 3 siblings, and a whole bunch of us. And we all went on Hawaii, and my brother was videotaping all this stuff. And so Joseph would watch that to go to sleep every night. And that was another piece of the transition I'd forgotten about until right now. And he started sleeping longer and longer, chunks of time. Now, he takes a fair amount of medication to sleep, mind you, but he can go down at a regular time and sleep. And he's now sleeping 8 hours a day. But it took a bit of a transition, but he sure as hell sleeps a lot better than when he's at my house. So when he comes to my house, he is... well, the first thing he did when he came back to my house, because he doesn't come all the time, he only comes for holidays and this, that, and the other thing. If I go see him, I go see him. He wants, we'll go out to dinner somewhere or something like that. But if he comes home, it's usually for a family thing. First thing he did when he got home was go check out his bedroom, his old bedroom. And he's looking down there. He walks down the hall, and he looks in the room. It's not mine anymore. And he knew it wasn't his anymore. And I just thought that was the funniest thing. He just laughed. And I just said, okay, that's good. But when he's gone, he doesn't like staying at my house more than a couple days. If he stays more than 2 nights, he's starting to say, I want to get out of here. I want to go home. I want to go home because, Mom, you're still telling me what I'm going to eat. And you're still telling me when I'm going to bed. And you're still, the clothes they packed are what I'm picking out of my suitcase. Nope, I want to go home. Because those are his friends. And it took me a long time to really think that his paid staff are his friends, but they are. They're part of his community. It's probably a better thing to say. But they have his best interest at heart. I mean, I have friends, but they're not with me all the time. And maybe people should pay them to be with me, I don't know. But that is, I mean, it's those kind of things that you start thinking about when you're creating a community around your kid. Yes, ma'am, from Fresno.
Does Joseph sleep in regular bed?
Yes. He has his own brand new double bed. He has never slept in those things that I saw outside yesterday. I spent 6 weeks. I told you about behavior management training. First thing I learned about behavior management was that I was allowing Joseph to get up too many times. So I spent 6 weeks standing at his door, putting him back in his room, on his bed, every night for 6 weeks. Ask me if that doesn't make you loopy. But I did. I put him back in his bed. There was no speech, there was no conversation, there was nothing. I turned him around. Of course, I started this when he was a lot smaller. Some of these kids I see around here that are 176 pounds, they decide to do that, you're going to be in trouble. And I know, if Joseph says he wants to go that way and I want to go that way, we're going that way. It might be the long way around the block, but we are going to go my way eventually. But I was doing this, he was probably 6, 7, 8, probably 6, 7, 8 years old. I'm trying to think of how old, where was he? I started behavior management training when he was about 6, teaching him not to pull his sister's hair and to start sleeping through the night. And we were still doing some medication stuff to figure out whether the seizures were doing it. We weren't going to do a 24-hour sleep study because not happening. So I literally stood at his door and turned him around. I didn't care if he slept on the floor. I didn't care if he slept. We had kind of Joseph-proofed the room, so there was nothing to be. You know what Joseph-proofing is, right? Look at all those heads going. Oh man, have you ever bought a car? Don't you go and check if I took Joseph whenever I bought a car. Is it Joseph-proof? Because I'd moved up to a minivan, and you go, oh yeah. Do the windows go up and down? Can you touch the buttons? And now they've got the new ones. You can open them any old way you want on both sides. I said, no. I want the one with no door that he can't get out of. And he had the little vent, you didn't have the windows in the back that went down, they just opened like a vent, just big enough to throw all the cassette recordings out the window. That's Joseph-proofing a car. But we Joseph-proofed the room well enough so that I just turned him around. For 6 weeks, I just had to outlive it. And now when he doesn't sleep through the night, we know there's something either physically wrong with him or there's a staph issue. And he does not like staph. Then we have to figure out which one. But, and then we end up firing him. But sometimes it's because he's sad, because the staph Ben, the skateboarder I talked about earlier, was leaving. He was upset and didn't want him to leave, so he nests, which is what we call it. He pulls the comforters off of his bed and he puts it right by the door and sleeps on the floor. And that's okay, that's his way to object, but it makes us pay attention. That's how the team knows to say something to me. They aren't saying, so when we meet, I say, so, how's Joe sleeping? Is he taking his meds? How's da-da-da-da-da? You know, he's nesting. Oh, he's nesting again. Well, who for? Is it only when it's the interim guy or only when it's this guy? Who is he? We figure it out and we address it. But no, he's never slept in one of those beds. And I can take him anywhere and he can sleep there. When he comes to my house now, he won't sleep in another bedroom. He won't sleep in that bedroom, which is now an office. Anyway, his bedroom. And the other one is a guest bedroom, but he always thinks of that as his sister's bedroom anyway. So I have a single bed that I put on the floor in my bedroom, which is 18 by 25 feet bedroom, so it's actually like another bedroom without a wall. And he'll sleep on that. He won't go to bed before I go to bed, which is fine. But he'll sleep in beyond me. Sometimes getting out of the room is the trick. So I'm ready to get up, and he's still asleep at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm going, I gotta pee, I gotta go upstairs. I'm gonna go get a cup of coffee, okay? And I try and walk out past him. Sometimes I make it, sometimes I don't. Usually I get just past him, and I'm like, I'm like, damn. All right, Joe, we're having just breakfast. Get up. But yeah. It's, I know your journey, but don't stop dreaming. When I started looking for different organizations to give me hope, I went to TASH because I didn't think there were enough groups that gave me enough information on kids that were low functioning or severely handicapped. I hate those words. I don't use them anymore. I won't use them anymore. I was searching for somebody who could provide the right service. So I took a little bit from TASH and a little bit from an ARC and a little bit from here and little pieces from other family members who told me how they could help. The behaviorist I had for that year and a half saved my life, I really believe. Probably saved Joseph's life too. And certainly saved his sister's. I mean, Joseph's never pulled my hair. It hasn't always been this short, by the way. But he's only pulled his sister's hair. And one redhead in his kindergarten class, for some reason. But I don't know, and when we were in high school, you know how cool it is to be high school and go to a basketball game and your son's sitting there on the sideline with the team. He's just sitting there. And he's, he can make all the noise he wants because they're making noise. It's great, he could not be more included. It was just awesome. And I cannot tell you, he took driver's training, and if I've told this story, I'll tell you. He took driver's training back in the day when they actually, of course, like the VCR and the TV thing. Okay, well, so these are trailers they had in the parking lot of the high school that you could go inside, and they had simulators to do driver's training. I don't think they exist anymore, but they did. And he took driver's training 3 times. And the principal comes up to me. He goes, Pat, Joseph, I don't think we can sign him up for driver's training again. I said, well, why? And I said, is there no room in the class? I mean, do you have, kids lined up down the street that are going to get into these simulators? And they said, no. So there's room for him in the class. Why don't you want him to take it? He goes, well, he's taken it 3 times. I said, are you afraid he's going to drive? And he goes, oh, no. Well, then, why the heck aren't you going to let him in that classroom? I go, oh, well, I guess, okay. Fine. If there was no room, maybe I'd say, okay, we got to do a reasonable accommodation to let another kid in. That'd be fine. He had his turn. But sometimes people just don't think, but that was the most inclusive thing. That's the closest thing to video games he ever got to play with his peers. You know, and now all these video game things are on a phone. You know, he'd throw that across the room, and he can't get the thumbs to work like that, and he couldn't do any of that. And I had 3 daughters behind him, and they didn't have video games in our house because I didn't have video games in my house. And maybe I should have. But in high school, he could play on video games. And he could sit next to him. Who cares how many points he got? He was just sitting next to somebody else. So if this is what we're going to do during our school years, why wouldn't we create the exact same thing to be parallel for the adult life? But people haven't done that. People want them to be safe. They want them to have a job. It irks me no end, thank God. Not one person here, since I've been here, has asked me, does your son have a job? Because we know. They have the attention span of a flea. And if they make too much money, we're going to lose our benefits. And I don't want to pay attention to all that paperwork that I'm going to have to keep track of. So let's just do something wonderful in the community and have them fully included. There's nothing wrong with that. But why would I go backwards to the special day classroom that he started out in, and he couldn't talk to anybody in his class? When I wrote sign language into his IEP when he was like, I don't know, 4 or 5, I said I wanted it 5 because it was he was going into kindergarten. I said I want him in to have sign language in his IEP. I said you're gonna have to teach sign language. Okay, fine. So the teacher, you know, okay, I'm gonna learn C-sign in about 10 minutes, and I'm gonna learn some sign language, and she's gonna use sign. But Joseph had a class of 10, and there were no other signers in the classroom. Nobody was deaf. The teacher didn't sign. She was just going, okay, well, I think this is, okay. You get that, Joe? I said, what do you think you're teaching him? That is insane. So I said, well, we're going to amend the IEP, and we're going to change him to a total communication class. I'm going to put him in with deaf kids. And I want those kids who are signing to now sign to the teacher. The teacher's going to sign back, and he's going to learn sign language. And he did. He had about 27 signs. It was pretty cool. And then he decided to get lazy, so all animal signs became this. And also, sometimes it's his sisters. But he understood communication. That I knew he understood communication when he started getting sign. But the school district didn't want him to have sign language. They also didn't want to have a speech therapy, because why would you give a child who doesn't speak 5 days a week of speech therapy? To learn how to speak? That was a novel concept. And I thought, well, he needs more than less, because he already has nothing, so we got to do something. I fired a speech therapist for the very same reason, because he asked me in an IEP meeting, what is pre-speech? Let me break it down for you. Right before speech is pre-speech. It's listening. And he goes, oh, I said, you're fired. He got up and moved out of that IEP. He was probably going, thank God, when he walked out the door. But that's okay, he was off the case. Because you have the right to have qualified staff working for your kids as an adult. You also have the right to have qualified teachers. I asked for resumes on my teachers, and the speech therapists, and the physical therapists that we had. Because if you don't have the qualifications, I'm not going to waste my time on you. But I think building a quality life means to keep dreaming. Dreaming for what's ahead. Don't keep looking back over your shoulder at what has been. Because it's all ahead of you. And it's not over. It's not over for me. I may be ahead of some of you age-wise. A lot of you, maybe all of you, age-wise. But it's what you have to figure out you're going to do and be creative about. Joseph's life is pretty damn good, and it's because we let him choose what he wants to do, where he wants to go. And I admit, we're in an urban area, we're in San Francisco. I mean, wouldn't you all like to go to vacation in San Francisco? So that's what he's living a life of a vacation in San Francisco. And so when you're in a rural area, you're right, you're going to have to be creative in a different way. Transportation's going to be different. Who you hang out with is going to be different. What you do with those people. But don't discount the staff as not being part of his community. They may be paid, and we talked about hiring and firing in kind of critical ways earlier today, but it really is creating a community around your son or daughter. From the grocery man to the church. We went to a church because they didn't make us go to a nursery room or whatever they are. And we could go to a regular church and sit in the pew. And Joseph loves going to midnight mass at the church up the street from ours, because as soon as that organ starts playing, he is singing. It is a mournful sound, but he is singing. And everybody's going, whoa. And as soon as they stop, he stops singing. And when they go up, he just loves it. But this is how I knew music was part of his life. And that's why he played drums in the high school orchestra. I mean, those are just kind of the silly things you think, is that stupid or what? But what are you going to do for those rest of the years of high school if you're not doing reading, writing, and arithmetic? He's not going to name the 50 states, and he's not going to drive a car, but he's going to learn to be a part of his community and enjoy it. And I'm not going to make him do stuff he doesn't want to do. Well, I don't know if I've run over time, but I think I've run out of breath. Any questions? Oh, yes, ma'am. Well, does anybody have any questions? I thank you very much for having me here and for participating and sitting here all day, because a lot of you have been here for most of the day. I do appreciate it. Thank you so much.